The envelope arrived without warning. No return address. No name. Just a single cryptic symbol on the front. A circle with a cross through it. Inside, a letter typed with chilling precision. This is the Zodiac speaking. It was August 1st, 1969. The San Francisco Chronicle had seen its fair share of strange fan mail. But this wasn't fan mail. It was a confession. A declaration of murder. A riddle. A threat. The letter described in graphic detail 2 unsolved murders. It included information only the killer could have known, down to the angle of the stab wounds and the color of the victim's clothes. It was signed not with a name but with a symbol. And it ended with a puzzle. A cipher made up of 408 symbols, supposedly revealing the killer's identity. 3 newspapers received different parts of the letter. And the Zodiac gave them a deadline. Print this by Friday, or more will die. Panic spread like wildfire. Was this a sick prank? Or had a ghost stepped out from the shadows of Northern California? Within days, readers across the country were hunched over breakfast tables, decoding the ciphers with their children. Cryptographers, police, even amateurs, everyone wanted to solve the puzzle before the killer struck again. But the Zodiac wasn't finished. Another letter came. And another, each more taunting than the last. Each challenging the police, the press, the public. A game, a hunt. And in the middle of it all, a name that kept appearing in confidential files, crossed out in red ink. A man no one ever caught. A man who vanished, but whose shadow never left. Decades later, an old file was opened in a dusty archive room. And what it revealed would force everyone to ask the same question. Did we ever really want to know who the Zodiac was? Or were we too afraid to face the truth? Detective Raymond Shaw had seen darkness. But nothing haunted him like the Zodiac case. In 1970, Shaw was a young beat cop in Vallejo. Fresh out of academy. Eager. Naive. He was the second officer to arrive at Blue Rock Springs Park on the night of July 4th. 2 teenagers had been shot inside a parked car. One survived. One didn't. The girl, Darlene Farron, was dead by the time backup arrived. Her boyfriend barely clung to life. Shaw had seen blood before, but not like this. Not with such calculation. It wasn't random. It wasn't impulsive. It was surgical. For the next 2 years, Shaw became obsessed. Not officially, the department had more experienced detectives on the case. But he stayed close to it. He read every file, attended every briefing, and kept his own journal of theories. By the time the Zodiac's 4th letter arrived, Shaw was convinced this was no ordinary killer. This guy's not just playing games, he told his partner one night. He wants to be immortal. But the deeper Shaw dug, the worse things got. The Zodiac didn't just kill. He performed. He created elaborate puzzles, sent mocking letters, and teased the police like a puppeteer watching marionettes. It wasn't about the victims. It was about control. The department was overwhelmed. Leads went nowhere. The media circus exploded. Copycats emerged. Politicians demanded action. And somewhere in the chaos, Shaw's own brother, a high school junior, was stabbed on his way home from football practice. The crime was never linked to the Zodiac. But the knife wounds, the timing, the randomness, Shaw never believed it was coincidence. He buried the grief and poured himself into the case harder than ever. Consumed him. Years passed. Suspects came and went: Arthur Lee Allen, Rick Marshall, Lawrence Kane. Each with a trail of circumstantial evidence. Each escaping arrest due to lack of hard proof. Fingerprints didn't match. Handwriting didn't align. DNA was inconclusive. The cipher? Mostly unsolved. By 1995, the trail had gone cold. Shaw was forced into early retirement after a heated argument with a new lieutenant who labeled the Zodiac case as ancient history. Divorced. Alone. Haunted. Every night, Shaw sat in his dusty apartment surrounded by old files and faded photographs. He talked to himself, to the victims, to the killer. "One day," he'd whisper. "One day you'll slip." Then, in 2021, a woman named Kimberly Ross sent him an email. Subject: File 347A. Body, you missed something. Read line 27. Shaw almost deleted it. Probably another conspiracy theorist. But something, maybe desperation, maybe instinct, made him dig through his boxes, pull out the old records, and flip to file 347A. There it was. A faded report from 1973. A letter received by the Chronicle, never released to the public, believed to be a hoax at the time. But it wasn't the content that made Shaw's hands tremble. It was a fingerprint. Not full. Just partial. Barely visible. But Shaw remembered. That partial had never matched any suspect in the database. And line 27? It listed the name of the postal employee who logged the letter. A man named Dennis Kaufman. Shaw hadn't thought about Kaufman in decades. Back then, Kaufman was just a quiet clerk. Polite. Clean record. No one suspected him. Why would they? But now, staring at that name again, something felt off. Shaw called Kimberly. She picked up immediately. "You saw it?" she asked. He hesitated. "Who are you?" "Just a librarian," she replied. "But I think I found something buried." Kimberly had stumbled across the file while digitizing old case records at a university archive. She wasn't a cop. She wasn't even a true crime junkie. Just someone who noticed details others missed. And she had questions. Why was Kaufman never interviewed? She asked. Shaw didn't have an answer. Together, they began piecing together a new theory. One that would take them into the heart of a cover-up so old, most had forgotten it existed. Kimberly wasn't looking for fame. She just wanted to know why. Why her uncle, a reporter, had gone missing the week after writing a story about the Zodiac letters. Why her mother had received a typed postcard 2 weeks later that simply read, "Stop digging. Some answers are meant to stay buried." The night air was cold when Shaw pulled up outside the university's archival building. Kimberly stood waiting under the flickering lamp, clutching a box of records wrapped in twine. She wasn't what Shaw expected. Mid-30s, quiet but assertive, with eyes that had clearly seen loss. "I thought you'd be older," she said dryly. "I am," Shaw replied, rubbing his aching knee as he stepped out of the car. They didn't waste time. Inside the dusty archives, she opened the box and laid out her findings like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Letters, files, personnel records, all pointing to the same forgotten name, Dennis Kaufman. Kaufman had worked at the mailroom of the San Francisco Chronicle from 1966 to 1974. Always on night shift, always near the Zodiac letters. Never questioned, never profiled. And then quietly resigned and moved out of state. Shaw narrowed his eyes. "This is circumstantial." "I know," Kimberly said, "but it's more than anyone else's ever brought you." That was true. And then she pulled out the envelope. It was dated March 1973, from a donation box at the Berkeley Public Library. Inside, a children's book, Secret Codes and Ciphers. And scribbled on the back page, almost invisible beneath years of yellowing paper, was a line in faint pencil. "Killers write in code, but real monsters know when not to." Next to it, the same crosshair symbol. Shaw took the book with trembling hands. The handwriting, it wasn't an exact match. But it was close. Very close. Too close to ignore. "How did you find this?" he asked. "I work part-time cataloging rare books," Kimberly replied. "The library was discarding old donations. I noticed the symbol." Shaw was silent for a long time. Then, finally, he said, "We need to find Kaufman." "But he's dead," she said quietly. "Died in 1995. Shaw frowned. "Then we find where he's buried." That night, they began a new kind of hunt. Not for a living killer, but for the remains of a man whose death might still carry the fingerprint of murder. And what neither of them knew was that someone had already noticed their search had begun. A black sedan sat idling across the street. Engine humming. Windows dark. Watching. Waiting. Shaw wasn't used to partnership. Not anymore. But Kimberly Ross wasn't just another researcher. She was precise, relentless, and never asked for permission. Over the next week, they dove deeper. Old phone records, obituary notices, death certificates. Dennis Kaufman had been cremated, but not before his body passed through a small-town coroner's office in Ukiah, California. The records, sealed. Cause of death, undisclosed. Kimberly's voice shook as she read the scanned report aloud. No next of kin. No autopsy performed. Just buried and forgotten. That didn't sit right with Shaw. A visit to Ukiah followed. The funeral home receptionist was hesitant, but a $20 bill and an old badge still carried weight. Kaufman's death had been rushed. Signed off by a doctor who hadn't worked in Mendocino County for years. No digital trace of the cremation order existed. The funeral director didn't recall the case, only that a government official had called in the day after the body arrived. Shaw turned to Kimberly in the parking lot. That's not how small towns work. Someone wanted him erased. That night, they stayed in a motel off Highway 101. Shaw pored over the case files while Kimberly sat by the window, her laptop open and glowing in the dark. We're being followed, she said without looking up. Shaw froze. There's a black sedan. Same one from the archive lot. Same dents on the bumper. It circled the block twice before parking 2 doors down. He didn't panic. Just sighed, as if the inevitability of it all had finally caught up. Then we're getting close. Kimberly looked over. Why are you still doing this? After everything. He hesitated. Because my brother never got justice. Because these families, they never got peace. And maybe, just maybe, if I can help bring the truth to light, I'll finally sleep. Kimberly nodded. My uncle disappeared 6 weeks after writing an exposé on the Zodiac. He told my mom someone had been watching him. 2 weeks later, she got that postcard. Stop digging, Shaw muttered. Some answers are meant to stay buried. The next morning, Kimberly received an email from a burner account. Subject: let go. Attached was a photo, one taken through her motel window. She was visible, asleep. Shaw was at the table unaware. The timestamp? 3:08 a.m. They weren't just being watched. They were being warned. Shaw printed the photo. This means one thing. Someone's scared. That day, they visited the Berkeley Public Library, where Kimberly had originally found the cipher book. A clerk remembered a man donating a box of books in 1993. Middle-aged. Wore gloves. Said nothing. Kimberly asked if any other books from that box had been cataloged. The clerk nodded. We scanned most of them, donated the rest. But one had weird handwriting, so we kept it for records. She handed them a weathered paperback, The Art of Disguise. Inside, tucked between pages 87 and 88, was a napkin with a drawing. The same symbol, the Zodiac's, and a quote, You only see what I let you see. Shaw's blood ran cold. 2 books. Same box. Same handwriting. Same symbol. Kaufman had either known something, or he was something. Kimberly closed the book and whispered, We need to find out who really signed his death certificate. And this time someone else whispered too. Not in voice, but in action. Because back at their motel, their room had been ransacked. Not robbed, just searched. Files untouched. Laptops missing. Only one thing remained. A single envelope on the pillow. No words inside. Just a single pressed flower. A black dahlia. Shaw stared at the black dahlia. Not a word. Not a threat. Just the flower. But it meant something. He didn't say anything to Kimberly until they were safely in another motel, 2 towns over. Only then, after locking every bolt and shutting the curtains, did he speak. The Black Dahlia, he said quietly, wasn't just a symbol of death. In certain military circles, especially during Vietnam, it meant silence. Final silence. If someone left you that, they were telling you walk away. Or die. Kimberly paled. But that's not Zodiac's style. No, Shaw replied. It's not. And that's when it hit him. What if the Zodiac wasn't just one man? The room went still. Kimberly's voice trembled. You mean a group? Or a program? Shaw said. Someone trained. Someone protected. Someone used, and then discarded when things got too messy. They returned to the Kaufman theory, but now looked closer at his employment. Files showed he worked not just at the Chronicle, but had previously served as a Navy cryptographer. He'd been stationed in a top-secret signal intelligence unit during the early 60s, the same period the Zodiac began. That's when they found it, a redacted military file marked -66 Zambian kwacha. Psychological operations, asset deactivation. The project was shut down in 1974, citing moral breaches and legal liability. Participants were either transferred or silenced. Kimberly cross-referenced every surviving member of that unit. Only one was still alive, Martin Grayson, now a 72-year-old retired intelligence officer living in Oregon, and more importantly, the man who signed Dennis Kaufman's death certificate in 1995. They flew out that night. Shaw knew what they were walking into. Kimberly didn't, but she followed anyway. Grayson lived in a modest cabin. Alone. No family. No visitors. When they knocked, he opened the door like he'd been expecting them. You're late, he said. Inside, the air was thick with old secrets. Newspaper clippings lined the walls. Maps, victim photos, cipher fragments. Grayson sat slowly and looked at Kimberly. You found the flower, he said. That was for me. Not you. Shaw stepped forward. Did Kaufman kill those people? Grayson didn't answer. He just stared at a photo on the table, a younger man in uniform. Kaufman was brilliant, he said, but broken. We gave him puzzles, riddles, scenarios, but he wanted more. He started sending the letters to see if the public could keep up. So it was a government op? Kimberly asked. No, Grayson replied. It was a mistake. One we let grow. One we couldn't stop. And when it got out of control? Shaw asked. We erased him. Silence. Then Grayson handed Shaw a folder. Inside was a confession letter, not public, not typed, handwritten. Dated June 15, 1995, the day before Kaufman died. It ended with the words, I was the Zodiac, but I was never alone. Shaw didn't speak for a long time. He held the letter in his hands as if it might crumble with every breath. Kimberly stood beside him, overwhelmed. Not by fear anymore, but by something else. A strange kind of peace. They left Grayson's cabin in silence. He didn't stop them. He didn't ask for the letter back. He simply watched them walk away, the truth finally off his shoulders after decades in the dark. Back in San Francisco, Shaw submitted the letter to an investigative journalist he trusted, anonymously. No glory, no interviews, just the truth at last in the public domain. Within days, the story exploded. Zodiac confession letter found. Inside a government training gone wrong. The puzzle that took 50 years to solve. Kimberly's name was never mentioned. Shaw disappeared again, this time by choice. He packed away his files for the final time, burned the old photos, and one night, left a single flower at his brother's grave. This time not black, white, a sign of peace, of ending. Kimberly returned to her quiet life, but she changed. Stronger, sharper, and every time she passed by that library donation box, she smiled, because she knew that sometimes the smallest discoveries hold the biggest truths. And somewhere, in the corners of old files and sealed boxes, one message remained. The Zodiac was never just a killer. He was a creation, a mirror, a ghost built by secrets no one wanted to face. But thanks to two people who refused to stop digging, that ghost was finally laid to rest. Now the question is for you, speech balloon, if you uncovered a truth that could change everything, even at the risk of your life, would you speak up? Or would you stay silent and safe? Backhand index pointing down, let us know in the comments. And if you want more true stories that reveal what others tried to hide, subscribe now.